Welcome back, friends, to Fixing My Faith. My name is Vern Hool, and if this is your first time on the channel, you'll notice that in the description below we have a petition out in Canada similar to what Norway did. And we're going to talk a little bit more about Norway and how they're the one of the leading countries in the world. They're the fourth richest country in the world per population. And they have a high standard. They have a lot of oil, and they have a cool economy in Norway. In fact, if you do a little research, I was just talking to my good wife, and she told me about a situation in Norway where one community was really having trouble. And so the other community, the richer community, they all agreed to pay more taxes to help out the poorer community. Can you imagine that? You see, so Norway is being looked at all over the world by economists, by political people, how they run their economy, and they're deemed one of the happiest countries in the world if you do the research on Norway. And so if Watchtower loses this case with Norway, it's a huge loss. The whole world is looking at this case, and they're looking at why is Norway doing this, and this really helps us here in Canada. Thank you, Norway. So we're just in the midst of it. Let's first of all look at Jehovah's Witnesses. Let's see what they say. We're right on their newsroom, and January 11th, 2023. It says a Norwegian court grants Jehovah's Witnesses request to suspend deregistration. On December 30th of 2022, the Oslo District Court granted our brothers request for a temporary injunction to suspend the government's attempt to deregister Jehovah's Witnesses as a religious community in Norway. This became necessary because the country governor of Oslo in Viken announced her decision to revoke our national registration. The injunction allows us to keep our registration until the matter is further considered by the court. The Ministry of Children and Families is challenging our injunction. So here's a little picture. This is the Norwegian Remote Translation Office and Theocratic School Facility. The complex was used as the Norway branch office until 2012, when the work in Norway came under the supervision of the Scandinavian branch located in Denmark. And it goes on to talk here. I don't know if I'm going to read the whole thing. I'm not. But it gives some experiences here. So, Norway is now in court. This is what Jehovah's Witnesses are telling their people right here on this site. Now we're going to look at another news article here. And this is a news article from, I'll post this one in the description below. And it says the court case of Jehovah's Witnesses Norway kicked off. So here it is. Here's a picture of the Norwegian Jehovah's Witnesses out there with their cart witnessing. And let's read this. Norwegian Jehovah's Witnesses are in court this Wednesday and Thursday. So that's today and tomorrow, folks. So we're going to be watching this. They are fighting the government's decision to remove their registration as a religious community. The case is between the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Ministry of Children and Families, Dagen reports. The Oslo District Court is to rule whether the religious community should retain its status as a religious community and the rights to seal marriages. The state administration in Oslo ruled that Jehovah's Witnesses should lose this registration and the right for their exclusion practice. According to the administrator, this practice violates the Religious Communities Act and reported earlier by CNE News. And that's the disfellowshipping, the discrimination, and even to children. And that's where the governing body, former Tony Morris, got up and said, we will never change. So this, we're going to read further here. The religious community shuns members when they leave the group. That means that family members and friends are forbidden to contact them. The exclusion practice can also be applied to baptized minors if they break the community's rules. The state administrator argued that these practices violated members' freedom of religion and harmed children's rights by socially isolating them. In reaction to the ruling of the state administrator, the Jehovah's Witnesses decided to sue the state, Dagen writes. They sued the state. They requested the district court to postpone the implementation of the administrator's decision so they could retain the right to marry couples as long as the court had not spoken out a verdict. The district court agreed to that. However, if the community loses the ongoing court case, they will immediately lose their registration and the right to seal marriages. So we're all cheering for the Norwegian court system to bring this charity down on this religion, and therefore we have a precedent in the world from this country, and they have an influence to the G20 because Norway is a state, is part of the EU, the European Union. So all of these communities are all talking and they're all watching what Norway is doing. So here it is, pressure. The ruling body of Jehovah's Witnesses worldwide is the Supreme Council. Can you imagine that? Who's the Supreme Council? Well, here it is. It consists of 9 members on the Supreme Council, the governing body, faithful slave they call them. So at the end of last year, one of its members, Anthony Morris, published a video in which he condemned the ruling of state administrator in Norway and said the community would not budge on its exclusion practice. In the future, various governments will challenge our freedom to worship. They may try to pressure us, and this is what Tony Morris quoted, right here. If the Jehovah's Witnesses think people aren't watching, they are being watched by a microscope by all of the governments. We're going to tell you why just in a few seconds. The Bible warns of this, and we're going to show you. So in the future, this is what Tony Morris said, in the future, various governments will challenge our freedom to worship. They may try and pressure us to change our view of the scriptures, but we certainly won't do that. You remember that? That's what he said in the video. In addition, he announced the opening of a new office in Europe that is meant to defend the right to practice the faith. So you see here he is. Jehovah's Witnesses are at war. They have legal battles all over the earth. And here it says, however, in January, Morris resigned as a member of the Supreme Council, and the Jehovah's Witnesses have not made the reason for this public. Everyone's watching. Very, very interesting. Very interesting. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Norway because Norway, they have a lot of pull. Norway is one of the world's most prosperous countries, and the production of oil and gas accounts for 20% of its economy. Other important sectors include hydropower, fish, forest minerals. Revenues from petroleum are deposited in the world's largest sovereign wealth fund. Why is Norway important to the world? On a per capita basis, Norway is the world's largest producer of oil and natural gas outside the Middle East. The country has the 4th highest per capita income in the world on the World Bank. And for what is Norway famous for? Well, Norway is known for its stunning landscapes and natural beauty. One of the most beautiful areas is the Lofoten Islands of the north of the country. The islands are known for their dramatic peaks, the pristine fjords, as well as their unique culture and traditions. Not sure if I said all that right. But we go on. Why is Norway looked at all over the world? Well, the country has a very high standard of living compared with other European countries, and a strongly integrated welfare system. Norway's modern manufacturing and welfare system rely on the financial reserve produced by exploitation of natural resources, so on and so forth. So, these guys are looking at these religions that claim to be charity, like Jehovah's Witnesses, and they do nothing to help the poor, nothing to help the old age. And so this is what we're talking about. These religions that want to be charities and discriminate and basically kill people by abstaining from medical procedures that save lives, blood transfusions. They've been responsible for how many thousands of deaths, and it's still ongoing. So the governments are taking action. This is a stop funding organized religions in Canada that practice discrimination, and we named Jehovah's Witnesses. So this is starting to roll here in Canada. We have 126 supporters to date. We need 500. So, and it doesn't have to be ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. Any Canadian Anybody out there, if you know of a Canadian, send this to them. We need 500 signatures, and then we can take this to our parliament, similar to Norway. Now, I want to look at the Bible, and we went right to the Jehovah's Witness Bible, and I'm just going to wet my tongue here. Now, right in the Jehovah's Witness Bible, their latest Bible, the one that is missing 10% of its scriptures, but we looked at Romans. It does seem to be fairly accurate there. So we're going to use their Bible because this is a message to the Jehovah's Witnesses, right from their Bible. And right in their Bible in Romans 13:1, it says, "Let every person be in subjection to the superior authorities. For there is no authority except by God. The existing authorities stand placed in their relative positions by God." You see, so right here in the Bible, it's clear that the governments all over the earth are allowed to be in those positions by God. So what happens if we go against it? Well, in verse 2, it says, "Therefore, whoever opposes the authority has taken a stand against the arrangement of God. Those who have taken a stand against it will bring judgment against themselves." Isn't this what's happening in Norway, folks? Right from the Jehovah's Witness Bible. And in verse 3, it says, "For those rulers are an object of fear." So, we should be honoring and fearing the rulers, because we go to the rulers, the governments, when we need help, and they have armies and they protect us. In fact, the Jehovah's Witnesses were bragging about how they're in with the European Union for the protection, and they're protected. And but yet, on the other hand, when the governments say, "Hey, we don't like discrimination against children is not in our policy. You can't do that in our country." And when you get the governing body, the Supreme Council, getting up and saying, "We're never going to change," well, now you have a war. They went to war with the governments. So what have they went to war with? Not the governments. It says they're actually opposing God. The Jehovah's Witnesses have actually taken a position against God. So, folks, now what we see happening here is God is taking action through the governments, and this may be the start of what the Bible talks about, where the governments, God is not happy with what these religions are doing. These religions are not helping charity. And we can go further. Okay, so so if we look at what the Bible requires, we just have to go to the book of James. And we're in the Jehovah's Witness Bible. And I'll show you, this is an area where the Jehovah's Witness Bible does change things. So it's a letter of James. And if you go right down to the bottom, the first chapter, last verse, verse 27, Jehovah's Witness Bible says, "The form of worship that is clean and undefiled from the standpoint of our God and Father is this, to look after orphans and widows in their tribulation and keep oneself without spot from the world." So the form of worship, it's correct, but the actual translation of this, and we're in the New English Bible, it says here, "Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this, to visit the orphans and widows in their affliction and to keep one's self unstained from the world." So you notice there it's talking about a religion that's pure and undefiled. Well, the word religion really means belief. So the word, if you go to the actual meaning of it, but religions have adopted that, and they've actually made it so that you can only go through a religion to get to God. Well, that's all false. That's not what the Bible talks about. So the Bible here talks about religion. If a religion's a good religion, it says it should be looking after orphans and widows. And it even says that in the Jehovah's Witness Bible in verse 27. I'll highlight it. To look after orphans and widows in their tribulation. So when you have orphans and widows in Bethel, Watchtower, what do? Why are you kicking them out? Why don't you have an old age home for the Bethelites? Why don't you have a workman's compensation for all your Bethel workers when they hurt themselves and they're thrown out of the street? Maybe they lost an arm in the printing press, and you tell them you send them to the governments for help, but yet you're pulling in all the charity and you're all tax free. You see, this is why Watchtower has to be ended. The Watchtower is a business, and it does not follow the Bible. We show that over and over again on all of our channels, but without ranting too hard on this, This has to be a wake-up call, and the governments are waking up. We don't have to do a whole lot. We have to start the petitions and stuff because the governments have rules about those things here in Canada anyways. That's how we have to do it. So if we're standing up for what's right, we're going to stand up all over the world against this organization. This organization will experience its own Armageddon. It will reap what it has sown. You see, it's been sowing Armageddon forever. The end is any day now. You see, so the end is any day now for this organization. So, folks, keep tuned in for the next 2 days, and we'll see more on what happens in Norway. And thanks for listening. And take a look at the petitions below. Until next time, keep living your life with love. Bye for now.